Hello everyone, hope you're having a wonderful day and welcome to the fourth round of FIDE Candidate Tournament. We are covering Javokhir Sindarov's legendary run, and this time he's facing a very strong opponent, probably the strongest opponent is this tournament, which I personally consider Fabiano Caruana, world number three, not two, but I held him in a very high regards. Okay, so Fabi being black, Sindarov being white. Let's dive right into it. We have pawn to d4 by Sindarov, d5, c4, so the Queen's Gambit, and Queen's Gambit decline. Okay, knight f3, and most likely everyone here play knight to f6, and then white maybe play knight f3, knight c3, or bishop g5, even bishop f4. Everything is possible. But here, which I find very interesting, that black actually took the pawn on c4. So we are back on the Queen's Gambit accepted territory. e3, knight to f6, bishop takes pawn, and c5. So, well, normal Queen's Gambit accepted territory, like you first give up your central pawn by taking the c4 pawn, and then you would try to take the d4 pawn by your own c pawn. Castles and knight to c6, followed by this very standard queen to e2. A pawn sacrifice, not really, because if you take the pawn, the most played move is rook to d1, and then you just pin it to win it. But also, just you can just do this pawn sacrifice, which is actually quite good after rook to d1. White is already looking better. For one pawn, your king is staying a bit too long for in the center. There's some bishop b5 check, bishop e3, knight c3. You can easily imagine how fast white attack can grow. So that is basically never played. I mean, you take the pawn, but you never really keep it. A6 is a main move and also the most played, second most played move, but the most recently played move. Like it's a fashionable move now. Okay, we have knight to c3. A6 has a very clear cut idea of b5. So sometimes white actually do go ahead and play pawn to a4 to stop that. But you know, pawn to b5 is only gonna weaken his own queen set, black's own queen set. So more than likely, white actually just allows it and just keep on developing. Knight c3, b5, and here exclusively bishop to b3 has been played. Exclusively. However, bishop to d3 is a move which was played by Sindaro, and it was played only handful of time before. So it might have come with somewhat of a surprise for Fabi, which shows why Fabi take 12 minutes for his next move. And he played bishop to b7. Um, Maybe he was considering if to take the pawn or not, but it is just a very bad idea if you take this pawn because all the same stuff. And now queen rook to d1, bishop b5 is coming in. Let's say you play this, then a4, b4, knight e4. According to engines, bishop e3 is coming in. White is already have a winning advantage, so which is I mean have to be expected. Your king is in the center. The center has blast open. So yes, white is winning. So yeah, bishop to b7. That's why you played b5, a6, b5 operation. And because your bishop is on d3, a4 now makes a lot more sense. So because your bishop queen backtree is hitting the queen set pawn. And we have pawn to b4 after 10 minutes of thinking. There is a very high level game in this position played between two very strong grandmaster, Adhiban Bhaskaran and Van Forest, played in, well, 2017, so quite a long time ago, where Van Forest took the pawn on c4, and this is the best move according to engines. And after rook takes, he played knight to b4, and after bishop to b1, he took the pawn on d4, followed by bishop to e7, and he had equality. Actually, Van Forest went on to win this as black, so that is amazing. So, but just eyeballing it, white looks slightly better. Okay, so b takes a4 being the best move and being played before, but b4, however, is not a novelty as per to say, but it has been played only once by not a grandmaster. It was played between some lower rated players. And in that game also knight to e4 was played and knight to a5 by Fabi. Now Fabi basically blitz out this move, and also Javokhir so far is blitzing his move. He is still in his opening preparation, which is to be expected. You are white, you are playing Queen's Gambit main line, and it is just move number 11. You are expected to have prepared at least this much. The point is, if you take knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, well, it is playable and it is the best move as well. And after queen b6, black have to play a few more precise moves to get the equality. But if you manage to play all the good moves, let's say upcoming 5 good moves, then yeah, it will be equal. Okay, but Fabi chose to play knight to a5, attacking the knight on e4. Well, he is giving up the pawn on c5. What's the idea? Well, the idea is if you take the pawn on c5, then he is just gonna recapture. And then there is a knight b3 fork of rook and the pawn. And after you move the rook, I just take the pawn. And black has a very solid control over this square on e4. Your bishop doesn't really make a good impression right now, and I'm just castling next. So black has solved all his opening preparation or all his opening problems. So of course, this is not played. Here, Sindarov just blitz out knight takes f6. And again, Fabi taking 9 minutes to take capture with the pawn. He understood that now he needs the open g file. He is not really castling anymore. And so the game I was talking about, the two players who was very unknown player. Basically, the first white is about 2200 and the black is 2100. The game reached this position. And in that game, white played rook to d1, mistake or rather inaccuracy, where black has pawn to c4, good move, and black is taking over the initiative. So, but, well, Sindaro in his home preparation blitz out d takes c5 novelty, and it was in this position that we have a completely new game, and this is the best move according to the engines. And Sindarov took 7 seconds only to play this move. So, yeah, safe to say it's his preparation. He is very well within his preparation and he knows what to do next. Fabi, instead of taking back the pawn, plays knight to b3. So, knight in nice intermezzo, according to what I can see. So, here, apart from what Javokhir played, if you played anything else, then white actually has no attack at all, or rather has no advantage at all. Your rook is hanging, and let's say you try to do move the rook. Then after knight takes c5, believe it or not, black actually is the one who has more initiative in the position. This is hanging. There is a rook coming here with the bishop combined, and this actually becomes a very dangerous position for white very fast. So this is actually quite bad. And how many of us would have played rook to b1 or rook to a2 automatically because it's a fork, it's the knight attacking the rook? Well, not Sindarov. Still, he knows home preparation, I know, but c6 is a beautiful move. The point is, of course, you can't really take the rook. Then I take the bishop, and then I take the pawn on a6. Your king is in the center. Bishop b5 check is coming in. So let's say you move the bishop. So you can play king f8 or e7. Well, then I play knight to d4. And the knight on a1 is basically trapped. Can't really go anywhere. Bishop d2 will pick up the knight next. So yeah, that would just be winning for white. You can't do that, which is easy to calculate. But what happens after bishop takes c6? Well, isn't it the same thing? If I move the rook, you still go knight c5, right? Well, no. Sindarov played knight to d4. Only move to gain advantage from white side. And it's a fork on knight actually. And this time, you could try to take the rook on a1, but it's still the same problem. Knight takes c6, hits the queen. And let's say you go queen to b6, I just go back knight to d4, and the knight on a1 is trapped. Even though you may be able to get the knight out by, well, let's say b3, knight c2, still your king is in the center. That's the bigger problem. There is tactics like queen f3 is a, sorry about weird arrow. It's a very simple tactics, winning a pawn and stuff like that, you know. There's too many tactics in this position, and white is just better. So after knight to d4, more or less forced to capture the knight. Knight takes d4, e takes d4, and okay, Fabi played rook g8, which is the best move according to the engines. If you play queen takes d4, then bishop e3 and then f3, and the same thing happened in the game, or should have happened in the game, but with the rook g8 inclusion, which is a free move, of course. So you should include that. Oh, sorry, takes rook g8, hitting the pawn on g2 with the bishop. So we have g3, and actually g3 Javokhir took 26 minutes to play. Maybe he was recalling his theory, but maybe he is out of theory, who knows. But yeah, this is a very strong position for white already. And here, after 18 minutes of thinking, Fabi went wrong. The only move in this position to have maintained the equality is to greedy queen takes d4. It is not the pawn which we care about, it is the diagonal, this diagonal which will open up, that we care about. For example, if white play bishop e3, apart from that, what else, right? Then queen d5, threatening mate. f3 is only move, and now I'm threatening bishop e4. So you may get scared, but now you just calmly play f5, and whatever white plays here is insufficient. You have to calculate everything. If you move this rook from f1, the f3 pawn hangs. If you move this rook from a1, the a4 pawn hangs. And that's the problem. Let's say you play rook c1, the a4 pawn hangs. I mean, rook to d1 is what you want to play, but a4 pawn hangs and the rook is under attack. So that's the problem. Okay. And apart from that, let's say after f5, I mean, what else you play apart from that? You can play bishop takes a6. That's probably the best way to continue. But then I play bishop to c5. One of the ideas why you need this diagonal to be open, because now you can exchange off more pieces. And there's nothing better than exchange and play king g2. When after king e7, black king is perfectly safe and white king is also kind of same, but this looks more weakening to me. Okay, I mean there is a strong a pawn, so well both have their trump cards. There's apart from equality in the position, uh, the game can go anyway, any side. Like black can win, white can win, anything can is possible, of course. So after g3, queen takes d4, a greedy way to continue is the way to continue. But Fabi played f5. And now, from here onwards, Sindarov gave no second chance to Fabi. It's like best move after best move after best move. He played like a stockfish till this point also, and from here onwards as well. Bishop to c4, the best move according to the engines. A very strong idea. Why? Well, after 11 minutes, that is. So we are safe to assume that he found it over the board. What the point? If you take the pawn, let's say bishop queen takes d4, then I'm just gonna sacrifice the bishop on e6. That's the point, because this bishop, which is lured to c6, is actually hanging after queen takes e6. So if you take, then just winning. Apart from that, what else you can play? Well, Fabi played rook to g4 after almost 19 minutes of thinking. And now, very quiet and simple, bishop to e3. Simple development. Bishop to d5. Oh, sorry about my dog there. Uh, and okay, well, he doesn't want me to make a video today. Well, don't mind him. Bishop to d5. After 5 minutes of thinking, which makes a lot of sense, even though bishop to b7 is engine's top preference because your pawn is hanging on a6 after bishop to d5. But okay, bishop after bishop to d5, white didn't take it. White played rook to c1. Top move again, and bishop to e7. Fabi decided that there is no point saving the pawn. If you play a5, then bishop b5 check, and where is your king going? King e7 is not really appetizing. Apart from that, you can't really do anything. So a5 not really good, and if you play bishop to b7, you are basically accepting that you made a mistake on the last move. You basically give white a free rook a to c1 move. So well, no point in that, even though it is still the best move. Bishop to e7, and now Sindarov said, "Well, now I'm gonna capture the pawn. You had the opportunity to defend it, you didn't. Now it's just a free pawn for me." Okay, king to f8, because you don't really want to allow bishop b5 with check, so king to f8. It's still bishop to b5. A pawn up for Sindarov, and still attacking. So it is like being having an extra pawn and having a compensation. Okay, bishop to s6. At this point, Fabi was down to his last few minutes, and it is move number 22 only. So like they have to make a lot of moves to reach the time control, and Sindarov had a lot of time, but and he was really using it really well. He played rook f to d1 after 5 minutes, and after king to g7, played a beautiful move. Right? I mean, it's such a complicated move, and it's the best move, by the way. And it is so complicated that that Fabi, who has basically no time on the clock, cannot go into complications. Sindaro played the best move and best continuation with bishop c6, giving up the a4 pawn. That's the point. And Fabi didn't take it. Fabi played rook to a5. If you do, however, then I will show you what happens. If you take bishop c6, rook c6, and let's say you take the pawn on a4, because why not, right? Well, here comes pawn to d5. And that's the move which Sindaro must have seen, of course. But what follows next is amazingly beautiful. So I'm gonna show you what happens next. My threat, of course, being just gonna attack the queen, right? So let's say you play queen to a8, and you are actually stopping me from pushing the pawn forward because the rook is hanging. By the way, just for reference, if you take the pawn, which looks horrible already, then after queen c2, it's a double attack on the rook and the pawn on f5. So you're just gonna lose that. So yeah, okay, queen to a8, one of the top moves of engine. And now very quiet and simple rook b6. Now I am threatening to push the pawn forward. And same problem, if you take the pawn, I will play queen c2 with the same attack. Well, there are actually more than that. If you take the pawn, not queen c2, well, there is a beautiful bishop a6 check. And that wins on the spot because you're undermining the defense of that bishop. And yeah, your pawn structure is so bad. Well, the tactics like this happen. If you just move the king away, you lose a piece. If you take the bishop, then after rook takes, the f5 pawn hangs or f7 pawn hangs, and your entire position collapses. So that was the idea after bishop c6. I'm not saying Sindaro calculated everything within 1 minute, which he took to play this. He just had this feeling that bishop c6 and d5 will work, and it does work. That's what happens when you have a superior position. Tactics just flows, even you without calculating it, right? So rook to a5, just keeping the blockade on the d file. Bishop takes d5, rook takes d5, and another good move by Sendaro, rook to c5. Exchanging of more pieces, getting closer to that a pawn promotion. I mean, any end game with this a pawn is winning, and most likely the bishop one is the most likely you are gonna get. But any endgame you get in this position is winning. So yeah, more exchanges means better for you. And that, look at that rook. That rook is stuck. It can't come to the other side of the board. Would love to be on c7, b7, or a7 or something, or maybe even d7, but it's stuck there. Rook to d7 by black. Um, if you take the pawn on d4, well, then I play rook takes d5, and after queen takes d5, many moves are possible. But because there is a pin here, and I am the one who can decide to exchange, I can just push the pawn forward. And let's say you defend the bishop, then I just push the pawn forward again, and you have to unpin. So let's say queen to a5. Then, well, there are many moves, and like queen f1 is the engine's move, and white is winning. But even f3, human move would win, because let's say you play bishop e3, check, queen e3. Uh, well, the rook is under attack, so you play rook to g6. Then simple a7, and white is just winning. That pawn is very close to promotion. One beautiful line in this position is if you play rook a6 to get the pawn. Yes, you're basically gonna win the pawn, but then I have king g2. Had you played rook to d7, sorry, if you play rook to d7, then I play queen a1 check, queen b2 check, and it could get messy. So, well, king g2, and you allowed rook a7 because then there is queen g5 check, which forces basically resignation. Rook d8 is coming in. You have to give up your queen. So that was a long variation, but just goes on to show that how powerful of a move rook c5 is. So after rook to c5, we have queen to rook to d7, not exchanging. And as you are not exchanging, d5. But just within like few seconds, played by Sindarov, a very, very strong move. Again, same problem. Now white black took, he takes d5. And white simply plays queen f3. A simple double attack on these two pawns. And that's basically it. Bishop takes b2 was happened in the game. Fabi played bishop b2 to at least have a passed pawn of his own, which is very close actually to queening. But if you play d4, then there is rook f5. And the problem is this is hanging, that is hanging, that is hanging. I mean, everything hangs. So yeah, that just wins. So okay, bishop takes b2. And then comes rook c takes d5, rook takes d5, rook takes d5, and queen to e8. I mean, your queen is under attack. Now you are attacking the pawn on a4. But at this point, Sendarov doesn't care. He could play pawn to a5 and win slowly, but he doesn't care. Plays rook takes f5, attacking the rook. And after rook to g6, h4. Still doesn't care. He wants to checkmate the king. He has already seen the upcoming tactics. He has smelled the blood in this position that he can actually just checkmate the king. Bishop c3. So we are, freeing up the b pawn path. h5 hitting the rook. Rook goes to a6. So the pawn on a4 is doomed and the b pawn stays. But the problem is your king, and the king finally get hunted. Queen to g4 check. King to h8. Well, king to f8 is no better. There's bishop to c5 check after king f8. So king to h8. And here comes bishop to d4 check. And the idea is, you are just busted. f6 was played in the game. You can't really take. If you take, then queen takes. And after f6, I just take. That's it. So, f6 was played. And here comes the winning move. Rook to c5. Played within few seconds. It is move number 36. Fabi is basically on few seconds to make his next move. And there is no defense against rook to c8, winning the queen. Which is, I know you forgot about that. But yep. And this is where Fabi resigned. So back-to-back victory for Javokhir Sindarov, beating Pragyanandha, beating Fabiano, two great grandmasters and very much the favorites to win this tournament. Already making a very solid lead on the tournament right after the 4 rounds. And yeah, we'll see what happens next. So I hope you like this game. A very strong performance by Sindarov right from the opening till the end game, and the very clean execution. And yeah, so yeah, that's the game. I hope you like it, and if you do share it, and leave the comment about what's your favorite opening in chess, and we will try to make something work on that. And yeah, till the next game, I will see you. Take care. Bye.